The Digital Scene Show is sponsored by newmediawebinars.com. Free how-to webinars for digital media creators taught by industry professionals. Check us out at newmediawebinars.com. Stuart, welcome to the Digital Scene Show here in NAB 2010.
Thank you.
And you are with Blackmagic Design.
That's correct.
And you're representing the DaVinci color correction system, right?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, Blackmagic is here this year to show a number of different products, but the one which is really causing a buzz at this year at NAB is Resolve on the Mac. Essentially, Resolve has been traditionally catering for high-end film use and for color correction in commercials. But what we're actually starting to see now is there's more of a need for it in other areas of the industry as well. Over the last 8 months since we acquired DaVinci, we've really started to put a lot of time and a lot of emphasis on really trying to bring this to the masses. When you look at Resolve as a software, the software is incredibly powerful. It's been used on projects such as Avatar in most recent times, which is the James Cameron film. And then when you look at how that system actually works, it means that you're taking essentially footage into a system. You're working very heavily on trying to generate a look for the film. I mean, everybody can film something and make it look nice, but when you want to enhance them colours even more, is how we go about doing that.
Now, this is, you mentioned Avatar, so this is the same system that they used, the Resolve, which is now going for $9.95. Before it used to be like $1 gazillion, right? I mean, literally, you guys are introducing or brought down the price to almost nothing for independent filmmakers, basically.
Yeah, I mean, there is two different systems that we're actually showing here at NAB this year. We have a Linux-based system, which is the original system that was around 8 months ago, and we've continued to sell over the course of the last 8 months. That essentially is a multiple GPU machine, so essentially you can add more GPU depending on the power of the system that you require. So if you're working with maybe 20 or 30 layers of primary, secondary, color correction, power windows, etc., you may need more layers. Now the second version is actually for Mac, and that's at $995. Essentially this works on a single GPU, so a MacBook or a MacBook Pro or a Mac Pro. With that you can do around about 7 or 8 layers of uncompressed HD in real time. Now the key significance to both of these applications is that the actual software doesn't change at all. So whether you're working on the $20,000 software for Linux or the $1,000 software for Mac, there's actually no feature stripped out of that in any part.
And once you learn one, you know the other pretty much.
Exactly. So it means that today you can go out and you can buy a Mac version, you can work with it, get to understand it, you can work with it to the levels that I mentioned before of maybe 6 or 7 levels of HD, color correction. And then if you need more power and you want to move up to a Linux system, when you make that transition, there's nothing new you have to learn. The software is identical.
Right. Now, well, for those people that don't know the difference between color correcting and color grading, maybe can you touch a little bit upon those?
Yeah, so essentially with color correction, you have a series of stages. You have primary color correction and then you have secondary color correction. Primary color correction is essentially looking at the overall feel, the overall image, and essentially changing things like the blacks and enhancing a certain saturation or color over the whole image. With secondary color correction, you go and you pick out particular areas of the image to enhance. So to give you an example, I've shot a commercial, it comes into my system, I give it the overall look, I enhance the blacks, I enhance the whites, I maybe may desaturate it slightly. I then want to go and pick out the lips of the person who's on there, so make them redder. Right. So what I do is I go in, I color pick the lips, I tweak the red, make it brighter, and then what will happen is that from there on, I can then start adding further power windows and start adding further color correction to maybe enhance the sky, enhance the ground. So really this is a powerful solution, and throughout this whole process you really want to be working in a real-time environment, because if you have to render every 2 seconds, it means then that the process slows right down, and really for a creative process, the faster you're working, the faster your mind's working, the better.
So even with the $9.95 version you can work in real time?
Exactly, working real time, up to 7 or 8 layers of HD on the $9.95 solution on a Mac Pro.
What are on a Mac? Will it work on a MacBook Pro?
It will do. So if you've got
in
a MacBook,
real time?
yeah, exactly. So So on a MacBook Pro, you get that same level of performance of around about 7 or 8 layers of uncompressed HD. The great thing about being on a MacBook Pro is it means that at the end of your projects in the office, you can save all of that sequence and projects onto your MacBook and take it home with you.
That's right, that's right. So why would an independent filmmaker want to use DaVinci versus, let's say, the color corrector built into Final Cut? I mean, there's obvious reasons which you already mentioned, but maybe you can give a quick, top 3.
Sure. I mean, there's some other great solutions on the market for color correction, but we have to remember that DaVinci is really the number one on the market. This is where color correction came from. Essentially, the history of color correction starts with DaVinci. When you look at the software, it's feature-packed. I mean, there are hundreds and hundreds of different features in there, which are all capable of working in a real-time environment. And that real-time environment is really important. I mean, like I mentioned before, we really don't want to be stopping and starting. So if we can start to work in a real-time environment by adding a window, adding rotates, zooms, defocuses, bringing in multiple different types of resolution formats onto the same timeline, I mean, this is where the power really starts, and the power within your hands is really comes down to that real-time performance.
One final question, because we're running out of time, but is there any integration between it and, let's say, Final Cut Pro, Adobe Premiere Pro, or Avid Media Composer?
Sure. At the moment, this works with QuickTime files and DPX files. Also works with Red. So essentially, if you take a DPX files into the system, you bring in an EDL. There's a ton of EDLs out there which this will recognize. You essentially reconform or just copy that onto the timeline, start your work. The other great thing is that you're never actually working on the original file. You're actually sending links back to that original file, which means that almost you don't have to worry about affecting what the original file was when you brought it in.
I see. People want to find out more about DaVinci. Where do they go?
They can go to www.blackmagic-design.com.
And they'll find it there.
That's right. Those guys can find all the information there. There's a ton of Resolve information. There's also a microsite for Resolve that you can go in and read a little bit about some of the projects this has been worked on. Avatar, as I mentioned before, is one of the latest. Everybody knows how great a film that was, and all that color correction was done through a DaVinci system.
So Resolve is the one for $995. That's the one they should look for.
That's correct, yeah. $995 Resolve.
Fantastic. Stuart, great to meet you.
Great, thanks very much.